hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Lunchtime Lightning Talks. Let me introduce myself first of all. My name is Abby. I work with the Aspiring Speakers community and 15-ish other communities, all of which are run by RecWorks. They are completely free for our members, apart from if we have like a conference, then we do ask for a nominal fee, but on the whole, our events are all run entirely free for our members. So who are RecWorks? We are a tech recruitment company with a massive difference. Obviously, we are always on the lookout for more clients, and some of our best clients have come from community members who recommended RecWorks to their internal talent team. So if you're hiring for a new team or you're working for a company that is, please do let us know. If you want to know more about what we can offer, just send me a message on LinkedIn or Slack. My name is as you see it on the screen, and we would love to have that conversation with you and see what we can do. So what's the difference, I hear you ask? Well, also, we really do believe that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs. We have a particular focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development, and that is where our communities come into play. If people want to learn and others want to teach or share their knowledge, we are more than happy to connect you through our communities and events. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. Earlier this year, we made our 5,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor community. That does what it says on the tin. You can be a mentor or you can be a mentee. And we're really excited about how many introductions we've made through that group so far, and we're really looking forward to making more. As I've already said, we love to give opportunities for people to connect, and this event is part of that. If you want to know more about any of our other communities, again, please get in touch with myself, or you can message Helen Lewis if you know her, and we can take it from there for you. We have three great speakers to hear from today. We have Jeff, Rajani, and Lena. And today's session is being recorded, and you can find it on our YouTube channel. I will put the link to the channel in the chat for you as we go along, and there will be time for any questions and discussion after each talk today as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jeff to start us off. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much. There's a challenge now, making sure I try and keep to time. Well, welcome to my lightning talk. It's a funny thing, your reputation preceding you. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's really bad having your name against something. And somebody once quipped that the Jeff Watkins database was still running at the banking group I've worked at many, many years prior. I couldn't even remember writing it, let alone what it did. And they didn't know either. They just said it was still running and it was somehow business critical. So yeah, anyway, I'm Jeff Watkins. I'm CTO at X Design. It's a 450-person strong consultancy in Scotland and the north of England, and I'm here to deliver this lightning talk today on the 3 lessons I learned on my journey to CTO. I'd say that I'm maybe not the typical type of CTO, but then again, thinking about it and looking at the variety of the CTOs out there in LinkedIn, I'm not sure anybody is a typical CTO. It's such an interesting and diverse role, in my opinion. I mean, I've seen CTOs who've never coded and aren't really technical, all the way through to CTOs who are the sole developer for a company. It's not a regulated term. So whenever you see this name CTO, so the title CTO, what they're doing might be very, very different. So my journey to CTO, I've been now in the industry nearly 25 years. And I went all the way through from a graduate developer through to things like chief engineer, and then chief for technology before landing a CTO role. And even then, it was actually a CPTO role, which is interesting. It took me even more out of my comfort zone. And my first sniff of that was actually at the first company I worked for 20 years, BGSS. And I got down to the last 2 to be CTO for the company. It was then sort of 500 or 600 people. And actually not getting it, although it was a blow, it was a little bit of a blow, but it was also, then it made me think, well, I got that close, I got so close. Maybe next time, maybe it's my time, maybe I go for somewhere small, maybe I try something slightly different for a while. And I don't know, it sounds like sour grapes when you get somebody to say, well, actually it was the best thing that happened to me. But I genuinely think that maybe I'd have still been there and not gone on a slightly different journey if I had got that role. So my journey was many years in the making, and I think I wasted a lot of time on the way. And I think other people, probably get there sooner than 25 years, frankly. So there's few things I've learned. One of them, it's a tricky one for me and I'm sure for many technologists, you'll be stepping away from hands-on tech for the most part, in a medium to large size organization at least. When I was a principal architect and chief engineer, I was also still quite hands-off, but I was also quite removed from the business elements. I think that's the biggest change for me. I realized pretty quickly I had to care about that side. As a CTO, you need to think beyond the technical aspects and develop a strategic approach to technology, and more importantly, its role in the organization. You need to work closely with other departments, marketing, finance, operations, to ensure that technology initiatives align with and support the broader organization goals. It's not tech for tech's sake. Technology doesn't really solve, technology doesn't do anything on its own. It needs to be solving an actual problem, and the problem is quite often a human-related thing. So in my case, the heads of engineering did the bulk of my technology strategies for the individual capabilities, and we have a central company strategy which I help work on. But my actual CTO strategy is the bridging piece; it's the glue between the two of them. So there's 3 sub-points. This really is aligning technology strategy with business goals, effective communication and collaboration in that between the areas of the business and technology, and actually the resource management and prioritization to make sure that the company is staying technically aligned. You need to think about potential impact of the technology strategy, return on investment, available resources, people you can hire. Also considering the risks and the mitigation and the long-term scalability of it all. And one thing I hadn't put enough thought to before reaching this level was how much I'd have to delegate. And to delegate effectively, you need a really strong team, or stronger than you are in some cases. This means you need to buy or build that team. That means you need to empower them so that you don't become a single point of failure. You don't want to be the single decision maker. So part of that, building and nurturing high-performing teams is talent acquisition and retention. And you need to think about how are you sourcing your people, how are you attracting the top talent, and how are you actually making sure that you're measuring the satisfaction of your team, work-life balance, and long-term commitment to the company, because the average tenure in a company is actually starting to go down. And that includes providing mentorship and professional development for them, making sure that you're doing the same for yourself. But also, tech people like to experiment. So actually having a culture of innovation, make sure we're thinking about creative problem solving, risk taking. But soft skills and emotional intelligence, really, we need to start emphasizing those as well in the Gen CTO. You need to be a very effective communicator, because you're going to be up and downward managing communications. And conflict resolution negotiation, as a leader, you will need to actually arbitrate over some pretty difficult decisions. There's empathy and team motivation, making sure that you understand the needs, the challenges and the aspirations of team members. One of the key ones I found is the patience and willingness to be wrong. When I stopped feeling entitled to being right, stopped trying to be the smartest person in the room, and stopped trying to hog the limelight, that's when things really started moving for me. So I think I'm going to keep to time just about. So in conclusion, I had to learn a lot, and none of it was about technology or further my technological skills. That was not the answer to progressing to be a CTO. I had to become the bridge, the glue between technology and business worlds, but I had some knocks along the way. It didn't happen overnight. There's no rush. Enjoy the experience of being in the tech sector as a journey. I lost that joy sometimes when I tried to be too ambitious. And there isn't one path, but I think there's 3 personal things I learned that surprised me that weren't skills for the role. It's back to my opening about reputation preceding people. Networking, writing, speaking will all help you measurably. I saw such a change in my career when I started doing these. So many people started to reference my articles, my talks, and my podcast. I knew I was kind of onto a winner then, and they helped me secure the role I have today. Linked to the above, don't tread on people or make enemies along the way. Even if people aren't being nice to you, or the rival, or for a particular role or company, be easy to work with and don't burn bridges. I've seen too many people get on the naughty list. In a surprisingly small world, a word gets around and mud sticks for years. And in reality, there is no one CTO role. The more senior you get, the more varied things become. And as a junior developer, that's what I did, write code. Now I'm doing many different things, half of which probably don't appear on a job description anywhere. So, well, thank you very much. I think I just about stuck to 7 minutes.
Well done. That was a great achievement, Jeff. Thank you. That was really interesting to hear from you. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one. I was wondering, how did you, because I'm going through this whole, like I would like to be an aspiring CTO, and I'd like to be a CTO, and I'm looking at like the skills required to get there. And you were spot on about, the three things, which is also what I am focusing on. So right now I'm looking at the business side of things and how I can bring the business to the technology and be that glue. I have taken some initiatives, but I would like to know from you, Jeff, how did you, what steps did you take to actually be that glue and learn about the business and get there?
So I think there's a few things. I think understanding the operations and the actual finance side really help, because if you're building an engineering team, they need to be ones that effectively, we use the term, wash their own face from a point of view. So there's obviously, as you grow, a part of growing an engaged team is you will have some people who are less billable. You'll need some people working on your tech, your actual tech capabilities. So I think understanding how the mechanics of the business, how it actually operates, how you look at the EBITDA, how you look at the gross margin and things like that. And some of them are dry topics, but I think also into the people side, and looking at things like the EVP, and just really get involved with all of those areas. And it's as simple as I asked our finance director to put on a 2-hour seminar for us, and go into great detail how the finances of the company work. And that was great for everybody who attended it. So I think it's really just outreach to them and say, look, can you tell us what you do? And so we can ask questions and understand. And you can do the same for them. So our people team said, can you please take us through your tech strategy and what it means for us? And okay. And it's like it's an exchange of TED Talks on each area. That's how we've done it.
Thank you, Joe.
Excellent. Alex, you've got a question. Go for it.
It's not exactly a question. I'm doing one of those things where I'm just actually getting my oar in and not actually answering a question, pretending it's a question. I just wanted to say I'm just amused that Jeff here didn't become the CTO of BJSS, because the person who I think did get the job actually gave me a job. So
I recognised your name, Alex.
Oh, I guess I'm one of those people who's probably burnt bridges and left a mess everywhere. No, thank you very much for the talk. I think I promised Abby I'd ask a question, and my problem now is that I didn't actually have anything I could ask you. That was actually really interesting. Thank you. I've stuck in a couple of links or mentions in the chat,
cool.
Which are Scale Factory do what used to be called breakfast stops, brilliant for aspiring CTOs, and CTO Craft is a company that tries to be a community for CTOs. And I think the one message I'm hearing from Jeff is that you don't have to be any particular type of person. Who, if you are seriously thinking about being a CTO, I'd say go for it. Yeah, sorry.
I think reach out to people on LinkedIn. People are more generous with their time than you'd expect. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you like.
Fantastic, thank you. Excuse me, sorry, I've got a frog today. But so our next speaker today, I'm very excited to hear from again, is Rajani. Over to you.
Thank you, Abby. Let me try and share my presentation. There we go. Oops. Right. So just recently I was in a panel for backend engineering, and there was a few questions that were asked, which basically reminded me of how I got into backend engineering and what it really means, which you don't think, because you're all, constantly like just moving from one project to the other. And that panel was a really good, like a avenue for me to like just, stop, think how I got there. And I thought it'd be really nice to give a lightning talk on yeah, on this. And if there are other backend engineering people who want to get into backend engineering, I just wanted to introduce all of you to what goes on behind the scenes in backend engineering. What is it really like? And go from there. So about me, I'm a principal engineer at a company called uBlocks. We build positioning, wireless, cellular modules and chipsets. And I'm in this beautiful niche of working with embedded systems. Like I have like these. So my services work with devices like that. And the niche, I like the niche because before getting into backend engineering, I used to work in embedded systems, so write firmware for TVs, and everything was resource constrained, right? Like you have to think about the CPU cycles and you know, the performance with just limited memory bandwidth, and that's all you thought about when you were writing firmware. And then I got an opportunity to build a service. And at that point, I didn't even know what a web service was, but it was really good. And I liked the fact that you switch over from, and I had to write a service for the embedded system. So you still have to think about, you know, the data rates and bits and bobs and how you can be efficient and so on and so forth for the data to work on these chipsets. But at the same time, it was like, for me, felt like, wow, there's no CPU like on the cloud or wherever you're hosting. You can throw as much CPU as you want, and performance doesn't really matter as much. It does in the long run, but you know, there's enough for you to run, and there's no memory constraints. And I loved being that bridge between the embedded systems and writing services for these devices. So I will share what I think is backend engineering. So backend engineering refers to so when you have a UI or a web application, and as a user you're using it, backend engineering is everything that runs behind the scenes to make your, you know, your interactions with the apps and websites really great. So it's everything from APIs, it could be databases, it could be, you know, DevOps, your infrastructure, anything and everything. It could mean queues, whatever it takes, so that the user can actually have a very good experience on the front end. So so if I were to sum it up, the backend is responsible for handling the user requests. So it could be the interface could be just an API, or it could be a website. So the user is inputting something, and there's data getting processed, either changing the way being stored and being processed, so you can get a response back onto the client side. So why is it important? Backend engineering is important because it is responsible for, it's quite complex as well, and it's a whole like a mix and mash of technologies. It's responsible for storing, retrieving data, managing the user auth, you know, security. You have to think about security, and executing complex business logic. And in my case, because I work for GNSS systems, which are satellite systems, it's and cellular base stations, is doing this heavily complex business logic of processing the information that's coming from these devices. So it can be, yeah, depending on what project or what product it is, you know, things change, and what services you use to build your backend changes. So it is important because you want, if your backend is not designed properly, is not implemented properly, then the user experience is affected. So backend is everything to make sure that you can provide a good user experience, and that's why it's really important to get the backend right. So what technology and skills would we need to be a backend engineer? So for me, there's two important things. One is, of course, you need to understand programming, databases, web servers, and equally is also your collaboration, understanding the software development processes and collaboration, and make sure that we have reduced integration issues with this collaboration, because usually when you are developing a backend, it involves more than one component, and you want to make sure you collaborate well to make it happen. Just having the understanding of programming languages is not enough. And what skills would you need? Of course, programming languages such as Java, Python, Ruby, C#. It could be anything that you write your backend in. Your databases, it could be RDBMS or the NoSQL columnar like MS, MySQL, MongoDB, PostgreSQL, and you also have like a plethora of databases on the cloud. And then experience of web servers, Apache, Nginx, IIS, etc. But like I said, with more and more serverless architecture coming into place, like cloud, these things, all of it is managed by AWS. So you could write, like, say, use an API gateway and give these web servers, and you don't have to manage the infrastructure. And of course, you need to learn how to design your APIs and how to develop these APIs using REST, and being more confident in like what is the right way of developing this, and how do you make sure this API is secure, and thinking through thinking through like designing APIs is a challenge. When you start, you think this is what you need, but with more experience, I think you get better at designing these APIs. And of course, understanding software development processes like Agile and Scrum. And I think it's really important, and these things really push you to be a great developer, not just a person who is an expert, but also getting better at building systems, because you then collaborate to build a better backend. And of course, security. So what are the challenges we face during like in backend? And these are some of my favorite challenges. You have much more than these, but these are my favorite. Like scaling. So you want to be able to scale. So if the web applications grow in size and complexity, you want to make sure that you have put things in place so it can scale, and it doesn't like because of the number of requests coming in, that it causes a system failure. So thinking through this and making sure that you have enough, you have put in architectures to scale is quite challenging, and sometimes quite tricky as well in different scenarios, how you would make the scaling work. The second thing is security, just making sure that it could be at the level of just at your API, your databases, just making sure through and through that you have taken care and make sure that it's all stored securely. Depends on the applications, like financial applications have a higher level or a need for security, whereas some bits of services may not require that. However, like the basic things that you need to think through and make sure that it is secure. And performance is basically make sure that when and this often in my field where we're doing a lot of number crunching, we need to make sure you optimize the performance, and we use various strategies to optimize the algorithm for performance, and make sure that response is quite fast. And you could make it distributed, so on and so forth, but there are problems to solve, and I enjoy solving these challenges in backend engineering. And integration. So for me, integration is so often we build systems assuming certain like, okay, this is what the API works. But if we challenge the assumptions and say, hey, and we clearly stated this is how it works, then when you come to integrate, it's not like, oh, wow, I thought you were doing this, or I thought you were doing this, will be eliminated. And I think we are getting better, at least from what I have seen earlier when we used to integrate systems, I'd be like, oh, but with Scrum and Agile, it's really helped us integrate our applications and components better. My favorite topic is architecture patterns in backend engineering, and I will just give you, for those who are interested, like a very high level view of this architecture. Feel free to go look up about it and read. So initially we started with monolithic in architecture, right, where one application would do everything, which means if something failed, the whole application would fail. We didn't want to be there. From there, we moved on to like the microservice architecture. There are various other architectures, but just talking about in general, in microservice architecture, where you split, or instead of putting everything in one, you split the application into different components, and they run as a different service. You decouple them, which really helps. Thinking through the failures, etc. So you decouple them. So if in case there's a bottleneck in one component, then you can scale that component alone to make sure that you get the benefit without having to scale the whole application. So microservices is really good if you haven't come across that. And then and now is the buzzword, right? Serverless architecture. And from the past few years, I think 4 or 5 years since AWS, I use AWS Cloud to architect my systems. And I find it so powerful, and that we get components readily available, SQS and SNSs and the database, which are already like highly available and scalable. So you don't have to worry about these things. All you have to do is plug in and make sure that indeed the whole system is scalable, is performant, and is highly available, and everything that you can think about. And it really makes the architect's life easier by moving to serverless architecture. So if you haven't given it a go, I'd say, try it. Sometimes it may not be applicable, but I believe if you challenge your assumptions, you will be able to, bring in some serverless architecture and make. So basically, this means that my team is focusing more on actually engineering than maintenance by going with serverless architecture. So I definitely recommend try that out if you haven't already. So that's it. So conclusion, backend engineering is a critical component, and it takes care of developing and maintaining everything that is the side that you don't see, the front end. It's everything there, and it could get complicated if it's distributed, so on and so forth. And it's quite challenging, and at the same time interesting. And remember that basically you need, as backend engineers, to work collaboratively to solve some of the integration issues and think about security, scalability, and performance. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rajani. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yeah, Alex, go for it.
I was trying to delay for somebody else to come up with a question. Thanks, Rajani. It was very interesting. I've got, I actually have a question for once. You've described back engineers very well. Thank you very much. I see quite a lot of people calling themselves full stack engineers, which I believe is kind of including the back-end engineers. But if you're kind of telling me, well, like a back-end engineer is like a full person's job, well, do you have any opinions on full stack engineering?
Yeah, so I think full stack is both like the UI, the front end bit, and the back end bit. So and usually what you do is you get stacks that work along the like the readily available stacks that work right from front end to the back end. So when they say I'm a full stack engineer, it means I know about like the Node.js, React.js, whatever, the stacks that we are talking about that you want to use all the way until the back end. And backend engineering. So I am not great. I would never go for a job for full stack engineer because UI never interests me at all. And for me, just the whole backend engineering is so challenging and amazing that I'd leave like, hey, someone else take care of the front end. But that's just me, right? But there are engineers who like the whole, would like to see the whole vertical and be part of it. Did that answer your question, Alex?
I think so. Yes, I think so. I'm hearing that. So people can do the full stack engineering, but they don't necessarily get into the detail that you like by focusing on a particular thing. Thanks very much. I had something else But I see Mark has got his hand up, so I'll let him go.
Okay. Yeah, I was quite interested in the note you made about scaling systems. I just wondered if you got any stories of where the back end services you've worked on have been connected to a website that's gone viral. So your technology has been put under severe strain. It's always a kind of a worry when you're working with limited infrastructure.
Yeah, I do have stories. So basically, when we started off, we did the in-house hosting, and then because we got like a lot of customers, we said, okay, we need to now host it externally. So we went with peer one hosting, and then from there we were like, oh my God, now we have more customers. Now what do we do? And it took us like 3 months even get a contract sorted with these hosting companies so we can increase. So we said, right, chuck all of that, we go to cloud. So I helped move our services to the cloud, and basically we started with EC2s, right? And we have 3 EC2s in 3 different regions to help the load. But things get viral, and then because the number of WebSockets, and it was hosted on IIS EC2s, we could not cope with the number of requests. So then we made, and also because there were like peaks, and every time we had to look at why the server is broken, and we stepped into using serverless, using lambdas and API gateways and ELBs and whatnot. So when we went there, the first thing we noticed is because it can scale so well, we were actually seeing like a small portion of traffic. As soon as we opened up and removed the scalability, the requests, we get like 6 billion requests a month. And we didn't even know we were getting all these requests to start with. So, and we were like, oh, okay. And then we realized that some of the requests, like a huge portion of the requests were invalid requests. So we had to make sure that we reduce the compute capacity for requests like this, and we had to like try and kill it. And yeah, so this is scalability. There are like, in terms of API and the whole infrastructure, but there are other examples like Postgres and so on and so forth, where we've optimized the performance there.
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, generally understanding the bottlenecks in a big system, in a situation where you get sort of an unexpected peak in hits, like, I don't know, maybe your website is mentioned on the 9 o'clock news, and all of a sudden you sort of get this swathe of requests coming through. It's something I've had before, and you think, yeah, it's hanging in there, but another bit of the system, like maybe the web front end has gone down, and actually the back end requests are holding up perfectly well because the requests just aren't coming through because another bit of the system has fallen down. But yeah, it's all very interesting stuff. So yeah, kind of relate to a lot of the things you said there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Fantastic. So last but not least today is Lena. She has been with us on our Couch to Conference course so far, which, if you haven't heard of that, it's like Couch to 5K, but for ladies who want to get into conference speaking. And so we're very excited that Lena's decided to take the plunge and do her first ever lightning talk for us today. So over to you, Lena.
Thank you very much. I've done the Couch to 5K, and I can confirm that this one is actually much harder to do. So hello, excuse me. Hello, I'm Lena Moonaram. I am a developer productivity engineer at Chainalysis. And today, what I'm talking to you about is the 3 things that I've learned in my career so far, because hopefully it's not over yet. So it's actually been quite interesting. So drafting this talk has made me consider, I think, my career in a new light. What have I actually learned over the, probably too many years that I want to say I've been doing it for. I always thought that the things that I would learn, or that I would say that I've learned, would be technical, but it's interesting for me that the things that have come up have not actually been the technical skills. They've actually been perhaps more character traits that I've developed. So surprisingly for me, it's been, that the main skills has been to, 1, try and take the first step, 2, to be persistent and to persevere, and 3, it's to actually never stop learning. So taking the first step, I'm going to give you a quote, which is from Rutherford Hayes, who was the 19th US president. And he said that every expert was once a beginner. And so I've worked with some great engineers over my career, and it's very easy to be in awe and intimidated. There was always someone that would be able to pick up something quicker than me, that would have more background knowledge, that would perhaps be a bit more confident. And previously, that has actually kind of made me hesitant to perhaps expand into these new areas where there were already experts, but that I wasn't quite there yet. And over the years, I've learned that I have to remind myself that experts are not actually created, they're actually created, not born. And the biggest challenge personally for me is actually just taking that first step. So when drafting this presentation, which for me itself is a first step, I must have kind of checked my emails, my Slack, my WhatsApp messages more times than I would care to admit before actually just starting. And obviously that didn't get me anywhere. What did actually get me somewhere was making that first mark and setting a title, even if I did change it 3 times later. I had an art teacher who used to make us rub charcoal over our white paper before starting any piece. And I always think that's a really good technique, because what you're doing is you're making a mark, and that mark is just designed to be a base. So she got us to start. And really from that, the blank page is intimidating, but you need to start. You just need to take that first step. The second key characteristic I think that I learned was to be persistent, to persevere. And for me, what I've learned personally is that failure is just another opportunity to succeed. I didn't always believe it, but I have found it to be true for me in most cases. I was made redundant a few years ago. And it's always a bit of a blow to your professional ego, even if, redundancies are sometimes have nothing to do with the individual. And so not having interviewed for a few years, over the space of a few weeks, I had to jump into have a round of a number of interviews for roles that sometimes I wasn't always the best fit, or sometimes the company wasn't the best fit for me. They actually got to the point where I just didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to interview anymore. I actually have a photograph taken on the morning of an interview that I vowed would be my last interview. I said that's it, I wasn't going to do anymore. But I did. I persevered. I went to that interview, and that interview actually, we matched. I was offered the role, and actually at that role, I found my niche, and that role has really set the direction for the next stage of my career. It could be luck. Looking back, I think a lot of it was down to kind of pushing through and actually just persevering. And I personally have learned that pushing through challenging circumstances, whether personal or professional, have always got me closer to my goal. The last key learning for me, looking back, was actually to never stop learning. In tech, nothing stays the same. If you want to stay in tech, you need to embrace the change and embrace learning. And it took me a while to accept this. As a student, you expect to learn. I expected to still be learning as a junior developer. I did, however, expect the learning to tail off a little bit as I gained more experience and perhaps I spent a bit more time. The reality, like I said, in tech, is the landscape around you continues to move. To be an effective engineer, I've learned that you need to embrace the change, you need to be the change. And also, my career hasn't been linear. I haven't stayed with the same stack that I started with X number of years ago. I've moved into management. I've moved back into development. I even ran a law firm for a number of years. Coming back into development after working in the law was hard. I still had the basics, but much of the tech I'd used had progressed and it had moved on. The cloud revolution had also started while I was away, but also with the cloud revolution came a wealth of learning, self-learning resources. And tech is a great industry where knowledge feels democratized. If you want to learn something, there are hundreds of YouTube videos and courses available. I learned that if I wanted to stay in tech, I had to jump in. I had to embrace the new and the expanded landscape. I had to learn. 8 years later, I'm still learning. So, as I said, drafting this talk has made a number of things quite clear to me, actually. Like I said, I thought the key things would have been that I'd learned would have been technical. But instead, I learned that my career path has forged the type of engineer that I've become. I've become an engineer that's keen to discover and to push boundaries by taking that first step. I've become an engineer that rarely gives up on a task and will actually push through to a conclusion. Become an engineer that embraces being a lifelong learner. So in summary, what I've learned is to just do it, keep doing it, and don't stop learning. Thank you.
Excellent. Well done, Lena. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any comments or questions? No, there you go. You were so succinct. No, not at all.
I just wanted to say that it was a really great talk. Like, I can't believe it was your first one.
Thank you.
Really well, and it really resonated about the things that you mentioned, that when you talk about tech, you think that you're going to only mention the tech stuff that you have learned, but there are so many soft skills that you learn as a developer. Absolutely. And there's like a thought about it, like, you know, where you mentioned that there are plenty of resources to learn as well, but I feel sometimes it's overwhelming as well. There's like too many. So how do you like go about you know, like choosing between the overwhelming resources sometimes, you know?
I think it can be quite hard. I normally start with a question, and there's normally a question that I'm trying to answer, or usually a problem that I'm trying to solve. So that can normally direct me into a general direction. And then I'm going to quote probably the first one, and it's pretty much just pick one and get started. And if that doesn't work, you know, I'm quite happy to ditch it halfway through and try the next one and just keep going until I manage to kind of answer that question. And then ultimately, I find is you learn along the way. You learn by not being able to understand things.
That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other comments or questions for Lena?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for doing a talk without slides, to show that it can be done, and you did it very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, echoing the thing, yeah, it's great to see people breaking out of the norm of using PowerPoint. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Must try that myself.
There are always opportunities, Mark. Get in touch with me. We'll get you up again.
Yes, I will do.
Fab. So that is our 3 lightning talks for today. Thank you so much to, excuse me, to Jeff, Rajani and to Lena. You've all spoken really well and given us some great insights and things to think about as well. So thank you for that. If you have been watching these talks and you think, oh my goodness, I'd like to do that, but I've no idea where to get started, please do get in touch with me, because RecWorks do run workshops on how to write your first lightning talk, and we're more than happy to put you on our workshops when we next run one. So we're just planning some dates at the moment, so do get in touch with me if that's of interest, and we can plan that in for you, definitely. But other than that, all that's left for me to say is thank you everybody for joining us for today's Lunchtime Lightning Talks. If you're watching the recording, I hope you've really enjoyed them, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.